Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is a build for Ordovis' Greatsword. It's the Greatsword that you get from the duo Crucible Knight boss in the Atlas Plateau. This is an awesome weapon. It hits really hard, has a very fun Ash of War, and we're going to get into build details, everything you need to know to turn this into a very powerful, high damage build that also does posture damage, and honestly, is a lot of fun. This is a really fun weapon to use, scaling primarily with strength and faith as a secondary. Now you're going to see some videos where this thing hits like an absolute truck, and it does. The fact that it does posture damage on top of the fact that this thing pretty much shreds makes it very, very viable for an awesome build in Eldenring. The only downside is the obvious one. It's very, very long to use as far as basically what you want to call the casting or the Ash of War goes. It does take a little bit of time when it's charged. However, because it's chargeable, it's boosted by both the Shard of Alexander and the Godfrey Icon, giving us a 30% boost. And that 30% boost is a lot on top of other buffs and stuff, that making this weapon very buffable, really damaging, and a very fun, mainly strength build with faith as a secondary in there. That's just really fun to use, and this thing absolutely smacks. And the Ash of War specifically is going to do primarily physical damage, so bosses with resistances or high holy resistance are still going to get hit like a truck with this, and they're still going to take posture damage as well. Before we move on and show you where to get the weapon and everything you need to know to make this into an awesome build, definitely hit that subscribe button if you love overpowered PvE builds or From Software games in general. This weapon, as you can tell, man, look at that. That really is just awesome, and it's a lot of fun to use. The placement on it is basically one of the coolest Ashes of War as far as style and design goes. It definitely is really awesome. Now, you get this from the duo Crucible Knight boss in the Atlas Plateau. I'm going to show it where it is on the map in a second, but just a quick word of advice for these guys. If you need help, don't be afraid to throw in a summon, and this is where it is on the map in the Atlas Plateau. You have to make your way down the dungeon past the chariots and whatnot. A little bit tricky, but not too bad. So we have the regular R1 attack, the charged R2, which does a lot of posture damage as well. Then you can block with it as well if you really wanted to block with it, though it's not going to do much for you as far as that goes. And then mainly what we're getting to is you can either slam down immediately or hold it, charge it, and get the Godfrey Icon boost on top of already having that Shard of Alexander boost, which in reality is our best bet for this weapon because you want to charge it fully for the extra damage in general and the extra damage from the Godfrey Icon too, making it very, very viable in the right situations. As long as you can land it, it's highly damaging. We're going to use stuff like Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. We'll go over buff stats and equipments later and all that, everything you'll need. As far as the weapon goes though, charging it down does a lot of damage. It absolutely shreds, and even larger targets like this dragon here, you're getting posture damage every time you use this as well, which makes it a very, very viable choice in the land of posture damage now, because we know recently a lot of stuff got nerfed in terms of posture damage, and now we have a sword that can do a lot of posture damage with its Ash of War, kind of make up for the recent nerfs to Flame of the Redmane and the Falling Star Beast Draw and whatnot. We can still get posture damage with this. This one wasn't really touched. As far as it goes, a lot of bosses, 2 or 3 of these, they're going to posture break. You can also do 1 and a charged R2. In a lot of cases, that'll posture break them as well. I know I'm showing various clips here and whatnot, but I really want to get the point across that this is a powerful weapon when utilized properly. Again, we're on journey, I think 7 at this point, new game plus 6. Everything has a ton more HP, but it doesn't even matter that it has a ton more HP as long as you can land these properly. And another thing to note is your hyper armor, while you use this, is unreal. You're almost unbreakable. There's very few heavy attacks that can push through and knock you back. Once you're in the animation, you're pretty much going to stay in that animation, be able to hit it, slam down, and do a lot of damage. And you'll take reduced damage, I think, in that state as far as the hyper armor goes. So make sure that you have enough defense. Here at 40 Vigor, I'm fine because we have a great set on as far as the Dragoncrest Greatshield Talisman, which we'll go over later. As far as this goes, though, definitely make sure that you have enough to take a few hits because you are going to get hit in the animation. Doesn't really matter, though, because even if you get hit in the animation, as long as you're not knocked back, and you survive, you're going to do a lot of damage. And as mentioned before, and we're showing again, the posture damage on this thing is brutal. It really does a lot of posture breaking, even on larger targets and bigger enemies. In smaller enemies and mob control, you don't have a lot of worry with this thing as well, because I don't know of many small enemies in the game that are going to knock you down or through the animation of the hyper armor. For the most part, you're going to be able to charge this thing, slam down, and absolutely obliterate any regular enemies that come at you. And even here, as we go for a bigger regular enemy here, you're going to see the amount of damage it does with just Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. This thing hits like an absolute truck. And since we have to have a little bit of faith anyway, we might as well do some buffs, get the most damage out of it, and take advantage of that. And NPC invaders and NPC enemies that are particularly tough, you can destroy them and honestly just stun lock them like crazy with this thing, because it's just going to hit them like crazy. They're not really going to be able to knock you back or do much damage, and you're going to end up destroying them. They're not really an issue with this. I tested it on various different NPC invaders and NPC characters and whatnot, and it absolutely destroys them. Makes it a lot easier to fight with this thing. Definitely useful in those circumstances. Now it's time on New Game Plus 6 to take this to a tougher boss in Radahn. Radahn's a little bit trickier than Morgott. He's not one of the hardest in the game, at least for me nowadays, but at the same time, he can hit like a truck, and I wanted to see if I had enough time to use the Ash of War on him, charge it, get a lot of damage, and then I was curious, because he does have high poise, if I could end up getting a posture break on Radahn. So could Ordovis' Greatsword have a very, very good effect on Radahn, who is a large target with high posture? Well, I tried this a couple of times. I believe this was probably the second or third try, and it actually went quite well. He did end up killing me, I think, once or twice when I got greedy, but if you pay attention, land it at the right times, you can do a lot of posture damage to any enemy that's in the game, while also hitting them for a lot of physical damage as well. And if you land it properly, because of the fact that it has such high poise, and don't get me wrong, if Radahn slams his swords down and hits you, that's going to break you out of this animation. There's very few attacks, but heavy attacks from bosses like that can and will definitely posture break you. As far as the hyper armor goes, it won't go through that. But it'll go through a lot of things, and honestly, holding it down, charging it, as you can tell there, we got the posture break as well. You're in position a lot of times to even not get hit potentially, and it's not too long. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit on the long side and a little bit dangerous in certain circumstances, but what weapon or spell or anything really isn't? And this one has style on top of the fact that it has good damage, and the A in strength scaling makes it a viable strength weapon to not just spam the Ash of War, but to also get a lot of general damage out of, and just be able to completely dominate the game and destroy bosses in Eldenring. This was a really fun one to do too. This was a lot of fun to just use this weapon. Ordovis' Greatsword is a fantastic weapon if you ask me. If I was going to grade it, a D being a worst and an S being the best, I'd probably give this a B plus or A minus for only two things. The fact that it does holy damage, the most resisted type, but that's to a lesser extent. And then the fact that it takes so long to use. So some of the late game bosses, like I wouldn't go and try this on Malekith, it probably wouldn't be nearly as viable on him, although you could potentially posture break him if you land it properly, but trading with him is not ideal. Alright, here we are. If you guys waited this long, checked out how cool this weapon is in general, let's go over equipment and stats. For this, we have Ordovis' Greatsword plus 10. Hopefully I've been saying that right. I butcher some of the names. As far as any seal will do, as far as that goes, Crucible Knight Set's awesome. Shard of Alexander, Dragoncrest Greatshield Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, and then you're going to want to have at least the defense tear in there as well to give you even more defense on top of the fact that we have good armor in the Dragoncrest, because you're going to trade in certain circumstances. As far as stats go, you generally want to go with 60 strength and 40 faith here because we're at 150. If you keep leveling up though, because of the A in strength and the C in faith, you can probably go all the way up to 80 strength and 60 faith to potentially maximize your damage here and do a ton of damage with the Ash of War, even more than I'm doing here, because of the fact that it scales with an A in strength, and the Ash of War is primarily based off the strength stat. That's where it gets most of its damage from. This one was definitely a blast to use. This weapon is a lot of fun to use. Ordovis' Greatsword is a blast. If you're not subbed to my channel, definitely sub if you love overpowered PvE builds. There's a ton of great builds on my channel. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys there.